good thing that happened with you this week. Man, I 10. We're going to read. Uh, I'm going to read verses 1 through 22. There was a certain man in Caesarea called Cornelius, a centurion of the band called the Italian band, a devout, a devout man, and one that feared God with all his house, which gave much alms to the people and prayed to God always. He saw in a vision, evidently about the 9th hour of the day, an angel of God coming in to him and saying unto him, Cornelius. And when he looked on him, he was afraid and said, What is it, Lord? And he said unto him, Thy prayers and thine alms are come up for a memorial before God. Now send men to Joppa, and call for one Simon, whose surname is Peter. He lodgeth with one Simon a tanner, whose house is by the seaside, and he shall tell thee what thou oughtest to do. And when the angel which spake unto Cornelius was departed, he called two of his household servants, and a devout soldier of them that waited on him continually. And when he had declared all these things unto them, he sent them to Joppa. On the morrow, as they went on their journey and drew nigh unto the city, Peter went up upon the housetop to pray about the 6th hour. And he became very hungry and would have eaten. But while they made ready, he fell into a trance. And he saw heaven opened, and a certain vessel descending unto him, as it had been a great sheet knit at the four corners, and let down to the earth, wherein were all manner of four-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping things, and fowl of the air. And there came a voice to him, Rise, Peter, kill and eat. But Peter said, Not so, Lord, for I've never eaten anything that is common or unclean. And the voice spake unto him again the second time, What God hath cleansed, that call not thou common. This was done thrice, and the vessel was received up again into heaven. Now, while Peter doubted in himself what this vision he had seen should mean, behold, the men which were sent from Cornelius had made inquiry for Simon's house, and stood before the gate, and called and asked whether Simon, which was surnamed Peter, were lodged there. And while Peter thought on the vision, the Spirit said unto him, Behold, 3 men seek thee. Arise therefore, get thee down, and go with them, doubting nothing, for I have sent them. And then Peter went down to the men which were sent unto him from Cornelius, and said, Behold, I am he whom thou seekest. What is the cause whereof you are come? And they said, Cornelius, the centurion, a just man and one that feareth God, and of good report among all the nation of the Jews, was warned from God by an holy angel to send for thee into his house and to hear words of thee. First of all, as we look at this, Cornelius is a Roman soldier. He is a centurion, which means he's over 100. And he's stationed at Caesarea. a seacoast city about 25 to 30 miles um, north north of Joppa. It was a fortress city. Um, Many of you have seen pictures of it that Doris and I brought back from when we went to Israel. A great deal of the outer structure is still standing of Caesarea, including a big arena. And it was a fortress city. It was built by Herod the Great for Rome, and he named it for Caesar, which obviously Caesarea. But the most important part of this passage to us is the fact that in it, Peter's vision that God had included, Peter was given a vision that God had included the Gentiles. This should be one of the favorite passages of everyone who's not a Jew, because even in the beginning of the early church, the Jews were still very standoffish. They were still kind of holding on to the idea that salvation and their God, Jehovah, was theirs and theirs alone. And so this passage that we're looking at tonight simply tells us that God took advantage of this. A man who was already a godly man, and Peter, to teach that salvation was to everyone. And I say salvation, what I see in Cornelius is a Gentile. Apparently, he is converted to Judaism. I say that because he was a devout man who feared God. And it was not the God of the Romans or the gods of the Romans, but rather he feared God. He feared Jehovah. And at that time, those who feared Jehovah, God, were worshiping through either Judaism or this newfound Christianity. And many, like Cornelius, had not heard the message of the new covenant. And so at any rate, as we look at this, he's a devout man, he feared God, and he gave much alms to the people, and he prayed regularly. Alms was the support of beggars or those who were indigent. I don't really know whether to try and compare those to the homeless of today. They were... There was no Social Security or any such government program to take care of people like this. They had to depend on alms. Alms were taught under the Old Covenant. So Israel knew of this and practiced it. And the only other source is family or church. The early church was taught to take care of its indigent. We find the first deacons were elected and appointed to the service of the daily soup line for the widows. But what we see in this is God's working on both ends. This man's regular prayer life was obviously to Jehovah God, because that's who answered him in his vision. An angel of God appeared to him and said, "Thy prayers have been answered. Send to Joppa for a man named Peter." Whether by Judaism or simply a lost man searching, we find Cornelius to be a sincere man who's wanting to know the way of righteousness. Personally, I think he was saved. I think he was a saved man who was saved under Judaism. I think he was a man who worshiped the same God that you and I worship. But like others who had not heard the whole story, he needed to learn more. An example of that is in Acts chapter 8, verses 30 and 31. The Ethiopian eunuch, he was a man who, again, was most likely worshiping Jehovah. He was most likely, y'all know where Ethiopia is. It's way over in northern Africa. He's there somewhere between Samaria and Jerusalem, and he's been there to worship. So he's likely a convert to Judaism. In Acts chapter 8 and verse 30, he's sitting in his chariot reading the scriptures. He's reading from Isaiah. In fact, he's reading from Isaiah chapter 53. But nonetheless, in Acts chapter 8 and verse 30, it says, Philip ran thither to him and heard him read the prophet Isaiah and said, "Understandest thou what thou readest?" And he said, "How can I, except some man should guide me?" And he desired Philip that he should come up and sit with him. This centurion, Cornelius, is in the same boat as the Ethiopian eunuch. He needed someone to guide him. And he has been praying for someone, obviously, to guide him. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, "Your prayer's been answered. Send for Peter." I don't know if Peter is specifically who he needed. I think probably it was because Peter was close. He was in Joppa, which is considerably closer than Jerusalem, where the rest of the apostles were, or those that were scattered. Most of them apparently scattered northward out of Jerusalem. But at any rate, it says in verse 9, "On the morrow, as they went on their journey and drew nigh unto the city, Peter went up upon the housetop to pray about the 6th hour. And he became very hungry and would have eaten, but while they made ready, he fell in a trance and saw heaven opened and a certain vessel descending upon unto him, as it had been a great sheet knit at the four corners and let down to the earth. Wherein were all manner of four-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping things, and fowl of the air. And there came a voice to him, Rise, Peter, kill and eat. This is Peter's blanket of food. Some of you older ones will remember our youth group back in the 80s wrote you called it a skit, but it was more like a play, because it was, we actually did this skit a couple of places in Indiana, and at least once in Sikeston. And it included that's neither here nor there. It covered this particular thing in it, along with many other things that led up to the crucifixion. And the trial of Pontius Pilate was the name of the play. For many years I had a copy of it, but I have no idea where it is now, because my office has become the family junk room. Where was I? Peter, rise, kill and eat. Peter said, Not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. Jewish diet. Proper Jewish diet that God gave them. And the voice spake unto him again the second time, What God hath cleansed, that call not thou common. This was done 3 times. And the vessel was received up again into heaven. Now, while Peter doubted in himself what this vision which he had seen should mean, behold, the men which were sent from Cornelius had made inquiry for Simon's house, and stood before the gate, and called and asked whether Simon, which is surnamed Peter, were lodged there. Y'all have, pardon me, I've got a inhaler in the car, and I looked at it and thought about bringing it in with me, and I didn't. I'm a little short of breath tonight. I want you to notice how God works. Peter has just had this fantastic vision 3 times, and then it's caught back up into heaven. And he's wondering what it is, and they're knocking on the door. Hello, Peter. I think I may understand. While Peter thought on the vision, the Spirit said unto him, Behold, 3 men seek thee. Arise, therefore, get thee down, and go with them, doubting nothing. For I have sent them. Then Peter went down to the men which were sent unto him from Cornelius, and said, Behold, I am he whom you seek. What is the cause whereof you are come? And they said, Cornelius the centurion, a just man, one that feareth God, and of good report among all the nation of the Jews, was warned from God by a holy angel to send for thee unto his house, and to hear words of thee. Now, we're not going to get to it tonight. Next time we look at Acts, we're going to find that he and his household hear what Peter has to say and are baptized. But what we want to look at right now is the fact that God was working on both ends. As soon as he's given this vision to Cornelius to send for Peter, he catches Peter while he's hungry, and these people are just outside of town, and he gives Peter this vision 3 times. If there's a mistake, we'll correct it. It was given 3 times. And each time it said the same thing. Rise and eat. No, I ain't never done nothing like that. Peter, what I have cleansed, call not thou common. He spoke to Cornelius in a vision, and now he's dealing with Peter to prepare him to receive these Gentile guests, and he's given him a vision. As the men came near, Joppa went up on the roof and prayed and fell into a trance. And you remember, Peter's a Jew. And, you know, the fact that he was saved and the fact that he was with the Lord for 3.5 years being taught didn't change his diet. As a matter of fact, there's altogether good evidence that Jesus had the same diet, because he was a Jew and he fulfilled the law, all of it. Ceremonial, dietary, moral, in every way. In his vision, there came down from heaven a sheet on the 4 corners, are bunched up, just kind of made it kind of a bag. And when it sat down on the rooftop in front of him, it just kind of folded out into a flat little picnic table. And his instructions were to kill and eat. You're hungry, eat. He refused, claiming the dietary laws of Judaism, but the voice urged him 3 times, what God cleansed, don't you call common. Now, the voice turns around then and says, there are 3 men downstairs waiting for you. I sent them. I sent them. Leaves no room for, that leaves no room for not understanding what this vision was about. Peter, I'm going to teach you a lesson about the Gentiles. I love them too. To the Jews, Gentiles were like an unclean animal. Peter's being shown he should receive everyone whom God has cleansed, not just Jews. Peter is very instrumental in the Jerusalem church receiving Gentiles. because they were standoffish to him, and Peter stood up and defended them. We'll read about that too if we get that far in Acts. I really think that the fact that the sheet came down from heaven in Peter's vision is an indication that Cornelius was already a saved man who simply needed more instruction. After all, we're talking about the early stages of the church. Up to this point, it has been Jews. Nothing more than Jews. The Jerusalem church was, some think it could have been as much as 5,000, and it was Jews. The deacons who were appointed because the Hebrew women were being neglected. The way they could tell them apart is they'd hold their bowl out and they'd say, the Hebrews would say, Shalom. And the Greek, these are still Jews. Remember, Jews have been scattered everywhere. The Greeks would say, Arene. And they get a little bit different portion. But it was still Jews. When they sent messengers, we'll use that since we're familiar with the term messengers. They sent messengers to Antioch of Syria and extended what we call extended an arm. Actually, they just passed on that power of the Holy Spirit. This was still Jews. They're in Syria, but this is still Jews. Peter alleviates this so that by the time Paul is sent out, he's ready to preach to everybody. But Peter here is instrumental in showing that the Gentiles belonged in the Lord's church the same as Jews. And and it's certainly the reception of it back up into heaven. It came down from heaven, and it's received back up into heaven. It's an indication that salvation and reward was not just for Jews only. Because these have been all kinds of wild beast, unclean beast. And yet, God said, I've cleansed them. And they go back up. As Peter was sitting and thinking about the vision, the Spirit said, go on down the stairs, 3 men seek you. Not only did God give him a vision, but he gave him it near enough that these men's arrival, that anybody ought to be able to put the 2 and 2 together. He just had a vision in which the Lord said, what I've cleansed, don't call common. And then 3 Gentiles show up saying the Lord has sent us. And that's all I have for tonight. Anybody? Comments, questions? I hope the presentation was not too boring, but I don't know how else to present the book of Acts. it's instructions as to how a church operates. And now we've reached the point where it assures the early church that we're included.